Let's move on to the important study sessions.
Item 7A, receive user fee study presentation and provide direction to staff.
Mr. DiMartini and City Manager.
Sure. I will open this up. Good afternoon, or good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Javon Grogan, and I'm the City Manager. I'm here today with Keith DiMartini, our Finance Director, and together it is our pleasure to present to you an update of our user fee study. As the Council and the public may remember, the City Council authorized funding of this user fee study in last year's budget. And a user fee study is a common project that municipalities undertake typically every 5 to 7 years to review all of the city's fees to ensure that we are recovering as much of our costs as possible, but also to make policy decisions on which services we want to subsidize and how much we want to subsidize those services from our general fund dollars. Our last comprehensive user fee study was completed over 10 years ago, and actually 2005, 2006. And so the council will know that this effort is long overdue, and it was one of the principal things on staff's work plan. And we have been doing a lot of work at that. And so tonight you'll receive an update. Next slide. So our objective for tonight's presentation is we want to give you an overview of the user fee study and the methodology that we've been using. We would like to highlight the policy issues that are available to City Council, discuss the high-level benchmarking of where some of our other cities are, and talk about the timeline and next steps. I also want to say that this has been an effort that has not just involved my time and your department head's time, but staff in every department and generally in every division. Over 60 staff throughout the city have been working on this project, and it is an in-depth analysis that Keith will go through, and hopefully not excruciating detail, but in enough detail to really let you guys know of the work that has been done at your direction. I also want to say that tonight you will not see specific fee recommendations. That will come at a later stage. Tonight's presentation really is an opening foray into the in-depth conversation that we're going to have on our user fees. And so we wanted to spend some time tonight giving you a high-level overview. And so our agenda for today, there are really 4 components, but we will begin with the objective. We'll review the scope. We'll talk about some constitutional restrictions and what restrictions we have by the California State Constitution when we set our fees, the methodology, and then we'll talk about the composition of the fee. Next, we'll talk about, again, the policy considerations and benchmarking, and then next steps. So I also want to say that this effort is a part of our larger comprehensive fiscal sustainability project. And so, as you know, we embarked on our fiscal sustainability project in the late portion of 2018, and it's really a 24-month project. But the goal of that project is to develop a comprehensive understanding of the city's fiscal pressures and constraints on the general fund, both today and into the foreseeable future. And that there are really 3 distinct goals of the project. The first is to understand our fiscal challenge, articulate it, and develop and implement strategies. And so this effort really represents all 3 of those goals. And through this study, we really have an understanding of where we are with some of our fees. I think some of the challenges we have with funding some of our services, you'll see why when we talk about our level of current cost recovery. So the amount of which we're recovering some of our fees, which in some categories is significantly low and very much below the benchmark cities. And then we are planning at least 1, maybe 2 more study sessions with you over the next few months to really have a deep dive on our fees, and then end really close to budget time with new fees that will take effect for our next budget cycle. And so this roadmap will look familiar. It's that 24-month fiscal or comprehensive fiscal sustainability road project. and we are right on track. It's January 2020, and this is one of our quick win short-term strategies. It's in the quick win short-term category because you as the city council have the ability to effectuate it. The decision rests with U5, and they can be implemented. Sometimes there's a 30 or 60-day waiting period, but you do have the ability to make this decision, and it is will have an immediate impact on our cost recovery for the various services. So I'll now turn it over to Keith, our finance director, and he will talk about a little bit more about funding of the city services and go through the bulk of our presentation.
Thank you, Javon. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Keith DeMartini, your Finance Director. Before I dive into all the work that's currently underway for the fee study, I wanted to first provide just a really brief overview of how city services are funded in general. Staff in multiple city departments provide a variety of services to the city's residents, businesses, and visitors. And while these services provided by local government are beneficial to constituents, some services can be categorized as beneficial to the city as a whole, while others primarily provide a direct benefit to the specific group or individual using that service. For example, a planner in the Community and Economic Development Department might only be performing a plan check review that is primarily only benefiting the developer or a homeowner. And not the community at large, while the maintenance of a city park, for example, has citywide benefits. In general, services that provide a benefit to the city as a whole are funded through tax revenues listed above, while user fees pay for the services that provide a direct benefit to a specific group or an individual. This user fee study has confirmed that a majority of the city's user fees are currently lower than the cost of providing those services. This has impacted a number of programs over the years, and the City Council may consider maintaining the status quo of these low fees or increasing these fees to a more cost recoverable level, or subsidizing fees, identifying other funding sources to subsidize them with. The council may also consider a hybrid approach for those different strategies, depending on the fee or the service being provided by the city. So let me start with what are our constitutional restrictions when it comes to the approval or changes of user fees. They're really governed by Propositions 218 and 26 in the state constitution, which limits the city's ability of setting the fees. The law limits the fees to be the reasonable cost of providing the service or the benefit. If the fee is more than the cost, it actually becomes a tax and requires approval of the electorate, which is why these user fee studies are so crucial to ensure that our fees are maintained over time and they're set appropriately. The standard user fee study process, which is employed by cities all throughout the country, is this effort that's currently underway with the city of San Bruno. And as Javon mentioned earlier, it just requires a simple majority vote of the City Council to enact. Cities typically will commission a consultant who specializes in these efforts to work with staff to conduct the study, articulate the cost of providing these services by each fee type, and then propose recommended changes to the master fee schedule. So what is a user fee? I just want to clearly define that before moving forward. A user fee funds a program and or a service that provides a private benefit to an individual or a group that is requesting that, with limited or no benefit to the community as a whole. And you'll see that state law requires that the individual or the group who uses the service must do so voluntarily, so not a tax, and the fee amount must relate to the service provided, directly relate to the service provided. This slide here lists examples of what are some typical user fees that are currently on our master fee schedule and on many other cities' master fee schedules. This includes a variety of different permits that might be required to be issued for any work done in your home or in your business, such as an electrical permit or a plumbing permit. It may also be a picnic table rental or a recreation class that you may participate in. A user fee is not these items listed on here on the right-hand side. It's not a development impact fee. It is not a water or utility charge on your monthly bill. It's not your garbage bill either. It's also not a tax. It's not your property tax bill or a business license tax that you may have to pay. So it's very specific to a fee associated for a service that you're requesting the city to perform. So with that context and that framework in mind, I want to just lay out what are the key components of a user fee study. The primary goal of the study is to really determine what are the reasonable full costs to the city of providing those services to an individual or a group. Each of those fees is calculated individually, and you'll see that when staff comes back to you with the consultant report. There will be a line for each fee and what it costs the city to actually perform the service to support that fee. It also includes developing a fully burdened hourly rate for our personnel, and I will talk about that a little bit more thoroughly later, but it's basically the full cost as an hourly rate divided by the billable hours associated with that work. And then we layer on additional direct and indirect overhead costs that are associated with supporting that effort citywide. It will also articulate what truly is the full 100% cost of performing that service, and it will provide an opportunity for council to consider setting those fees at a lower level based on some differing policy considerations. So the objectives, just to reiterate a few here, the study will develop a rational basis for setting those fees. It will help to understand what truly are our costs as a city to perform those services, talk about subsidy amounts. It will also help us to ensure that we're maintaining consistency with local policy and state law, and it will ensure that we have developed an updatable, comprehensive list of our fees citywide. So the scope of the study really is pretty much every fee on our master fee schedule, every user fee, and it touches all the departments on this slide listed here, pretty much every department in the city. It's also important to note that the scope of the study does include a benchmark comparison of what are San Bruno's user fees compared to what are some of the other user fees in some other cities in San Mateo County. It's really important to note, though, that the benchmark comparison cannot be used as the determination of how to set our own fees. It really must be set on a cost recoverable concept, which we'll talk about more. But it is helpful context for helping make an informed decision. With the consultant's help, staff and the consultant have reviewed and analyzed a variety of different data sources to help inform the user fee study. That includes our departmental budgets, salary and benefit information, the city's staffing structures, what are our central service organizations, such as the finance department or the city manager's office that support the direct service organizations. How do we come up and calculate our productive billable hours and our indirect cost rates? Staff developed really detailed time estimates for what it takes for them to perform the service required for these fees. And then we gathered a number of data points of city impact, input and feedback into various policies and procedures around our fees. This slide shows just the high-level summary steps of the study. It really starts with the data analysis first, and that has already been completed, all the data sources I just mentioned on the prior slide. The second major step was building the various cost layers. So really understanding the direct services associated with the fee, and then layering on top of it what are the indirect costs associated with it as well. So for example, my position in finance, I support all the city departments. And so it's important that a portion of my cost is attributed to the direct person that is also serving and supporting that building permit, for example. We've done that citywide. And then finally, the third and final phase is to actually set the fees. The study will define the full cost of services, and this item here in red is where the city council comes in and provides guidance to staff about how to set various cost recovery policies. What are your goals with subsidy, for example? And then after the city council has adopted the new fees, we will move into the final piece, which is publicizing the updated master fee schedule, launching it, educating our constituents, and then implementation. So this graphic here just shows you the pieces that make up the fully burdened rate for what it takes to provide a service to an individual or a group. And it really starts with the direct cost to start. So as the example I mentioned earlier for the planner that might be reviewing a building permit, for example, that person's hourly rate is the direct cost and any other third party or material costs associated with that review. And then we layer on top of that the proportional share of the overhead of the central service organizations or the department overhead costs on top of that to really truly reflect the full citywide cost of performing and supporting that work. This is an example here of maybe any user fee example where it might require the direct work of a permit technician, but it also may require some indirect support from a utility billing clerk or the city engineer or the director of public works as an example. So it just shows you how there are multiple people involved in supporting a user fee, whether it's direct or indirect, and all of those components have been taken into consideration with this study. So now that we've discussed about the scope of the user fee study, I do want to make sure that council is aware of the various policy considerations that you may consider. In general, an individual who receives a private benefit from the services should pay 100% of the cost of the city's staff support for that work. Sometimes a fee subsidy may be considered as a public policy tool. For example, a subsidy may be used to encourage participation, and it may for various youth activities, as an example, for like a swimming class or a senior citizen activity at the senior center. Another example of a subsidy may be to ensure or encourage compliance with a law or some other policy. An example of that might be a water heater permit. There's an interest in ensuring that water heaters are mounted correctly and appropriately and that they're safe. And so there may be a policy consideration to keep a subsidy for a water heater permit to achieve that policy goal. So those are some examples of policy considerations that council may consider. This table on this slide lists all the city departments that have been included in the scope of this effort. And the first column lists those departments, and the column directly to the right of it, the number of fees, is the number of fees that are currently in the master fee schedule, the user fees by department. So as you can see, there are over 700 user fees currently in the master fee schedule. And a majority of them are in the building division, in the community and economic development department, the parks and recreation department, and then also the fire department. The table also lists the current cost recovery percent of the program costs required to serve the public for all of those services at an aggregate level where the user fee is charged. The table also lists the cost recovery that a city achieves after they conclude their user fee study, and this information was provided to us by our consultant who has an extensive amount of experience conducting these studies for various cities across the state. As you can see here, most of our city departments are currently below the cost recovery percent compared to these cities. And our consultant has told us that the current cost recovery percent for the building and the planning divisions, they're depicted here with a red arrow, that they are actually the lowest that they've ever seen in conducting a study. So we do have quite a bit of work to do to bring our planning and our building division fees up to where they need to be to ensure adequate cost recovery. It's really important to understand what the long-term impact is with our fees being so below cost recovery. And the real true impact of that is it puts additional pressure to allocate funding from other funding sources, typically our general fund, to basically cover the costs where the fee does not cover it. It's also important to note that the current master fee schedule that we have, it does not allow for any annual cost escalation to keep the fees on pace with inflation or other normal cost increases that occur annually throughout our budget process. such as fringe benefits or other cost of living changes. Many cities have included an automatic inflationary adjustment on their fees listed in the master fee schedule so that those fees can keep pace with very typical cost increases. The city's master fee schedule currently does not have that. And so all else being equal, our fees become less cost recoverable every year. When reviewing the Consumer Price Index inflationary tables, if you take it from 1988 as the base year for a typical permit that may have cost $400 back in 1988, the fully cost recoverable, the full cost to the city today, if you were to adjust that cost to inflation, is over $850. So it has more than doubled since that time that the fee may have already been set. So it's just a simple example to show you how our fees have not kept pace with inflation.
Yeah. It's worth noting that Keefe used 1998 because even though the last study was done in '05, there were very modest increases to the fees. And so the last real wholesale increase was around 1998.
So the consultant report will also include a series of recommendations for the City Council to consider. The report will include a fee for full cost recovery, as well as staff's recommended fee level based on various considerations. The council may consider to add staff's proposed new fees to the master fee schedule, some of which are summarized in the report before you this evening. The council may also consider to discontinue any outdated fees that are no longer necessary or no longer required. The council may also consider implementing that inflationary indexing assumption that I just spoke about, to make sure that our fees keep up with the cost of living. And finally, the council may consider to establish a fully loaded composite department-specific hourly rate that can be used when work is requested of staff that isn't clearly already articulated on the master fee schedule. So it's really just to ensure that we can recover our costs for work that is being requested of staff by an individual or a group. As mentioned earlier, the scope of this study did include some initial benchmarking of a handful of cities in San Mateo County of what their fees are compared to San Bruno's. Again, just to reiterate, the fees set in another city cannot be used as a basis for setting our own fees, but it does provide some helpful context. Additional comparative information will be provided to council in the upcoming report as well. This slide lists a handful of permits and user fees in the planning division against some of our peers, and it does show that a number of these fees are lower than some of our peers as well. And it's also important to note on these coming slides how many of these cities have a different methodology. There's a different basis for how some of these fees are charged, so it is somewhat difficult to have a true apples to apples comparison on many of these fees as well. This slide again lists 3 additional permits or appeal types or in the planning division, again showing quite a bit of variability among the different cities in San Mateo County, but also showing ours as being a bit lower as well. This next slide here shows 5 permits and different types of user fees in the fire department. Again, some of our fees here are showing lower than some of these other cities as well. And again, I won't go through these too much in detail. Again, it's just some helpful context when looking at our fees compared to other cities. Again, showing the variability among the cities as well. So just to wrap up this presentation this evening, this project where we are now really starts with what's before you this evening, providing an overview presentation of the scope and the work that's already been conducted on the user fee study. Staff are preliminarily planning on coming back to council on May 10th for a study session where we will have the consultant report complete and recommended fee levels for your consideration. We're also planning on going to the Park and Recreation Commission meeting for an informational only session to discuss the Park and Recreation fees specifically with that body. And then if council would like it, we've preliminarily scheduled an optional study session with council again in late March and early April, again if that's requested. and then planning to come back to council requesting your adoption of the resolution and the updated master fee schedule on April 14th. That will give enough time for beyond 30 days to pass, so that all fees that are non-development related to take effect on June 1st, and then 30 days after that, all of the remaining user fees would take effect, which would be the first day of the upcoming fiscal year 2020, 2021. That concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Any questions from council?
I'm still stumbling over those numbers. I just want to
Laura.
comment, I think that, this is just excellent work, and it's something that's definitely overdue. And it's not to say that staff is not doing their job. There's always other priorities, and we know that in 2018, we made this to be a priority. So I do appreciate the work that's been done, and I know it takes a lot of hours and a lot of time because there's a lot of departments and it touches so many things. So I would just say that I look forward to another study session to get some of the more of the details back.
Michael?
I just wanted to comment also that I think this is a great analysis and very enlightening. It's amazing how far out of whack we can get even in just a short time. This is definitely very interesting. I had one question, just a clarification. So regarding any kind of subsidies, or if we wanted, just speaking earlier about, what we're willing to waive or provide reduced fees on. The way I understand it is we are not allowed to build in a cost to any of these fees that would account for those subsidies, right? It has to be really based on the true cost of it and not our policies, for example.
So what state law says is that for a particular fee for service, you have to charge the cost reasonably borne, which means there needs to be a nexus and a relation to how much you're charging for that fee. And in general, it cannot go over your cost to provide that service. There's a carve-out that we'll talk about in detail when we talk about some of the fees on an individual basis, where you can charge more than your cost when you are not the sole provider. And so when there's, for example, private market competition, you can charge more than your costs. So that's why the classic example is development fees. We're the only person that someone can come to for a development permit. However, for renting out our entire swimming pool, there are private pools that people can rent out, and so we can charge a demand pricing based on that. That can be more than our cost to operate that pool and staff that pool for the hour. And then part of your other question is, can we pass the subsidy for this program onto that program? In general, no. And so what we do, for example, in recreation, is you take a look at all of your fees and you make a policy decision on which ones you're going to subsidize. And oftentimes cities say, you know what, we're going to subsidize youth recreation, after-school programs, and on swimming, we'll subsidize youth swimming and youth swimming lessons, but maybe not adult swimming lessons to the same degree. And so we'll be having those in-depth policy conversations with the city council, knowing how much we currently subsidize in our budget, and maybe shifting around those general fund dollars to say, you know what, we're going to apply more general fund dollars over here to continue subsidizing this program, but maybe on this program, the cost will go up.
And I had broader concerns on how these fees might impact our lower income residents and fixed income residents. So as we look to correct, especially around, the permits, building permits and whatnot, at one point in there, it said, that the fees are, they're optional, people would choose it. But say, for example, your house needs a new roof. You have to go get a permit to put that roof on, and so it's not really optional for you. You have to go get that permit. And as these fees get corrected and those costs go up, that's really going to impact the people that are probably less able to pay those growing fees. So that's kind of where I was going with that, is that I don't think we're allowed to really account for some percentage of these things having to be reduced cost, but I guess we would have to then look to the general fund to subsidize ones where we make a policy that where if people need assistance that we'd be willing to do that.
Right. Absolutely, and there are ways that we can also address that through the methodology. Whereas, for example, a roof, you can't sort of have a different fee to review a residential roof than a commercial roof, but you could have a fee structure that has a base price and then a price that ratchets up based on the complexity and the time. And so we can address it through the methodology. And I think Director DeMartini mentioned water heaters, which is sort of the classic example. A water heater is sort of a simple replacement, but you want people to come in for it to get the literature on how to strap down a water heater properly for earthquake. And so oftentimes cities subsidize those permits where it's a very moderate cost to come into the counter. And what we really want to do is educate you in addition to making it not as costly to obtain the permit.
Okay, thank you.
Marty?
Yes, thank you. Something that's overdue, and it's here now. I appreciate the effort in breaking everything down. There's a lot of coordination there. I had a question about sheet or suggestion for sheet 18. When you break down the number of fees, is there a way you can add a column of what the percentage of those fees are? How much? What are the big ticket items? For instance, if something costs a lot of money that we're not, let's say in planning, that we're really missing out on that fee, it'd be nice to kind of see where that is. I'm not explaining it well, but you're nodding your head and you're really smart, so you probably got it. And then following that up to make sure that when those fees are recovered, that they're dispersed back out to each of the offices, that it doesn't just go to the general fund, it goes to actually pay for each of those departments. Is that correct?
So,
and how do you track that
right.
when the fee that just all comes out with
Right.
your permit fees and it'll line it all out?
yep.
Okay.
So, if I may, the report that will come before council from the consultant, it will list every single fee that is in the scope of this effort. It will show you what the current fee that is charged on the current master fee schedule. It will show you what is the fully loaded, fully burdened cost to the of the city to perform that service, and it will show you the full cost compared to the current fee. And then it will show you staff's recommended fee level, which based on the strategy and scope that we talked about already, whether it's primarily 100%, it should be 100% recoverable cost. If that work is primarily supporting an individual or a group, that's where the recommendation will likely be. And then any current subsidies we will include in the study as well. As to your second question, Councilmember Medina, most of these departments listed here are funded primarily through the general fund, but in our systems and the way we budget, they're budgeted within each department. And so all of the fee revenue for the building division, for example, stays, as we budget it there for the building division. An example that's not like that, for example, is our cable department, our city net services department, which is an enterprise fund. So that is in a separate fund. But we record the revenues and expenses within each department for the operating year.
Excellent. And I just want to also comment that I appreciate the schedule and the number of study sessions so that we can actually talk about these fees. So that's definitely appreciated.
Linda?
I just had a question about it's the chart that you have on it's page 8 of 11 on the staff report, and you might have also put up a slide. It's the slide where you have the current, and then you've got Millbrae, South City, Burlingame, Redwood City, and San Mateo. And so my question is, if we're looking to increase, how will it be determined where we're going to get? I know ultimately you'll need council approval, but how is staff going to make that determination? So, for example, variance single family right now is 1,975 here, but Millbrae is 1,267, South City is 4,312, Burlingame's 4,307, Redwood City is 2,989, and San Mateo is a $4,000 deposit. It's a really wide range. So is this, if it's going to increase, how are you going to make that determination?
So again, the benchmarking information that's provided in the staff report is really it's a data point. It's additional context for council to understand what is a similar fee charged in a similar municipality. It cannot be the basis for the setting of our fees. Our fees should be set on what is the true cost to our city to actually perform that service. And inherently, the San Bruno's staffing structure or other types of expenses, the way that we operate, it could be different than Millbrae, could be different than South City, depending on their staffing models, the utilization of consultants sometimes to support various efforts, so on and so forth, right? And so it's really difficult to sort of make that apples to apples comparison. And so we really just want to make sure that we're basing the fee on what are our true fully burdened costs, and then having that policy discussion with the city council about how and when and if that should be subsidized in any way.
Thank you. And I echo Councilmember Salazar's comments regarding just setting a requirement that some people may not be able to afford and may be mandated to fix. And so just something to keep in mind. I echo his sentiment there. Thank you.
And I appreciate the work and the report, because obviously we need to be current and get this updated, but also about the subsidy. I mean, it goes through various cycles and years. That long ago, the Parks and Rec and Library subsidized a lot of programs to a high degree, and then that's started to change. I mean, there was a day at the picnic sites in City Park were free. You just put a $25 deposit. So things have evolved, and I know it takes that cost. And so I want to be mindful of that as well to our residents versus non-residents. But I also do understand, too, that we really want to look at what programs are beneficial to the community as a whole. And so I would also echo that that is a concern. Maybe this isn't for this, but, you know, I know we take credit cards and it works and they're good, but I know we pay, a 3% fee. And I know, for the example, in County of San Mateo, you cannot pay with a credit card. In the town of Hillsborough, you cannot pay with a credit card. My understanding is that could be over $200,000 annually. So I don't even know if this is at the right venue, or maybe it's a budget time, but whether it would be detrimental, or would those costs be burdened upon the individual using that, who could use a check instead. So maybe that's something for a future discussion, but I know that's significant money that goes up in those charges that the city faces. But thank you for the timeline too. I think it's really clear, and you have it as moving through the process, and thank you for that as well. Is there anything, Laura?
Just one final question. I don't expect a full response on this that goes down to each individual item, but is there any way to get an idea from each of the other cities when the last time they did their assessment? Right, because I mean, you might look at a cost of Millbrae at $12.67, and you might think, well, that's great, but maybe it's been 10 years for them too. So it'd be nice to know if, you know, our actual cost is really high compared to other cities, and that's something you can look at, or why are our costs so high? So just as a...
I think it's a great question, and I think we can definitely look into that. I am aware of Millbrae going through that process currently. It's somewhat recent for them. I believe the information in our staff report and on the presentation is from their current fee schedule, so not updated, is my understanding.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of the other cities at this time.
Yeah, and if I can, one of the challenges with the benchmarking the fees is that these studies are based on your cost, and some cities may have more staff. And so sometimes it's the chicken and the egg. What came first, the higher fee or more staff? And so one of the challenges we have with our reduced fee structure, especially in our building and planning, is that does not give us the ability to hire more staff to actually have shorter time frames for turnaround times when we get a permit. And so that is one of the big challenges we have, because we are fiscally constrained and our fees are low. And so that also means that someone comes in and our time to process that application may be a lot shorter in Millbrae, but Millbrae's fee may be twice as more because they have the bandwidth to do that. And so a detailed benchmarking of fees is really not an apples to apples comparison, and which is why you really have to base these studies off your cost. And they evolve over time, and typically if you update them every 5 years, you can have truing up. as your staff grows.
Any other questions or comments? Michael?
Just one final thought. Speaking about the chicken and egg thing, so as we start going through this process, and if we determine that perhaps our fees, after you calculate your fully burdened costs, are really, really high, it could also open an opportunity for evaluating our processes and seeing if maybe we're not doing things the most efficient way possible. And then I guess we would have to go through the exercise again, but that could be an interesting data point as well.
Okay. And City Clerk, there is no speaker cards? Correct. And there's nobody here who want to speak on this topic? Okay.